And so we find ourselves October. It's our holiday season, fall, Halloween, and I love this time of year because it's like we get to honor like the horror and the fright and everything pumpkin spice and all of that. So the leaves are falling, things are dying, and I think there's quite a beauty in that. And I think the Dharma it really honors a lot of that fright and death and stuff like that. So wherever you are on the spectrum on here, maybe we can find a little bit of honoring of some of these, so-called frightful things as we step into this holiday season. And so on these Sunday mornings, it has become clear to me that y'all have been doing sutta studies, that you've been looking at specific discourses from the earliest teachings of the Buddha from the Pali Canon. And so I wanted to tease one out this morning that has all the fright and has all the terror of a horror movie, and that is the Angulimala Sutta. Some people love it. Some people don't know what they're getting into. I guess a little preview on this. I don't want to give the whole thing away, but it's a story about redemption. It's a story about forgiveness. It's a story about the beauty of all the places this Dharma can take you and the terror that this life can take you to. It's a story about a serial killer. So just like how like Netflix has all these specials on, Dahmer and all of this and that, and any of y'all watch those? Oh yeah, Debbie watches it. So this is the Buddhist version of any documentary about a serial killer. So let's go in our mental time machines. 2,600 years ago in northern India, there's a family of privilege. They work for the king at the time, King Pasenadi. And this family has a young boy. And there's a little bit of tradition at the time, especially those that come from higher castes, to take their young children to go have like a fortune teller predict what their life has in store for them. And so the family takes this little child to the fortune teller, and then the fortune teller says, "Oh no, this child's bad, this child's evil. This child is born under a criminal's moon. You need to make sure you do everything in your power to make sure this child grows up to be good, and make sure that he is extremely obedient and well-behaved." So this parents are like, well, we better make sure we do everything in our power. So they name this child Ahimsaka. And Ahimsaka means the harmless one. Like ahimsa is non-harming, Ahimsaka, the harmless one. And so as Ahimsaka grows up, his parents make sure that he is extremely well-behaved. They're like, helicopter parents on 10. Make sure everything is in order. Make sure you get good grades. Make sure, not only good grades, you better get all fucking A's. And you better look perfect, every hair in place. Your uniforms for school better look right. And it's like kind of that thing where when you grow up with that pressure, love is a conditional thing. And so Ahimsaka started believing that obedience equaled love. And this would stress him out as he was growing up. I don't know if y'all ever been there, but like staying up all night, nervous about the math test tomorrow. It meant so much for him to get an A on the math test when he goes to school tomorrow, because what would happen is if he got anything less than his A, his parents would shun him, would withhold love from him. And so as he grew up, he was great. He was well-behaved, looked the part, act the part, honor student all around. And so as he grew older, he was able to go to college. With his family of privilege and his great grades, he went off to college. And as he went to college, he still had this striving to do well, and he became a teacher's pet. Like all of his professors loved him, and he got all the praises and all of that. And if you know a teacher's pet, you may know that they're hard to get along with. Right? So all of his classmates hated Ahimsaka because they're like, oh, he's the one that's always getting the praise. He's always the ones that's, raising the curve on the grading scale, right? And so his classmates were like, we got to get rid of this kid. We got to make sure Ahimsaka gets out of school. I can't stand him, brown-nosing and all that shit, you know? So the students got together and came up with a plan to get rid of Ahimsaka. And so what they did is a pretty brilliant plan. They took 3 groups of students. And in these 3 groups of students, they came up with a lie. And so it was the idea that they say it 3 times. You know, you hear a lie once, you're like, I don't know about that. But you hear it 3 times, you start to believe it. So one group of students goes to the head professor and says, you know Ahimsaka, right? And the teacher's like, of course I do. I love Ahimsaka. Great student, you know, all A's, well behaved, all of that. And then the kids were like, well, you know, I heard him talking about this. He's like, he wants to kill you, and he thinks he can do your job better. So he wants to take your job, and he's kind of talking to your wife. And they're like, okay. Like the professor's like, that's weird. Why would you say such a weird thing? And I don't believe you. And they're like, okay, I'm just letting you know what I heard, you know. And then the next group of students come to the professor, and they say, you know, Ahimsaka, like he's like coming up with a plan to kill you, man. And he's trying to take your job. He's like talking shit about you, like how bad you are at your job and how better he could be. And he's got a thing going on with your wife. And he's like, oh, I heard that before. That's wild. I don't know about that. And then the next group of students come and say, you know, all of that. Oh, he's trying to kill you. He has a map planned out. And he's like, all Ahimsaka talks about is how he's going to kill you. And he's got a thing going on with your wife. I heard gross details, right? And so the professor's like, okay, I heard this a lot. This must be true. I got to get rid of Ahimsaka. So Ahimsaka was coming close to graduation. And the professor took Ahimsaka aside and said, before you graduate, I have one assignment for you. One last assignment for you. And so this last assignment that the professor outlined for Ahimsaka was collect 1,000 pinky fingers off of a human right hand. I've had some wild teachers in my life, but that's like the wildest assignment I've ever heard. Collect 1,000 pinky fingers off of humans? But Ahimsaka was so obedient, he didn't question it. So he was like, I'm off. And of course the professor thought, okay, he's going to go out there and try to kill people and somebody's going to kill him and, you know, the end of Ahimsaka. I don't have to worry about him anymore. But he underestimated Ahimsaka and how obedient and hardworking he was. So what Ahimsaka did is he went out into the forest and he like trained. He got really strong and he got a shield and a sword and he was especially fast. So he would run and run and run. They said he got so fast that he could outrun all the animals in the forest. So Ahimsaka was ready. And as he got ready, anytime anybody walked out into the forest, he would kill them and then chop their pinky finger off and collect it. And so more and more as people went out into the forest, they would die and word got out. And so people stopped going out into the forest. And like whole industries started to suffer. And so Ahimsaka started collecting all of these little pinky fingers and he didn't know what to do with them. So what he did was he made a necklace. And he made a necklace with all these like bloody fingers so he can collect them to turn into his teacher whenever he's done. And so he was like this wild guy in the forest with a shield, with a sword, really fast, with bloody fingers all across his neck. And the town's talking about him. And as the town's talking about him, they give him this name, Angulimala. So Angulimala means finger necklace. You know, like mala beads, that's like necklace. Anguli would be finger necklace. And so he's like the legend of Angulimala, this guy that just like kills people and takes their fingers. So people stopped going out into the forest. So Angulimala was like, well, I still need more fingers. So he would go into the rural cities, go into people's homes, chop them up, take all their fingers. And so a lot of terror. this guy's wild, killing all these people, taking these fingers, looking like a wild man. And so the townspeople went to King Pasenadi. And they were like, you need to do something about this guy. We got a serial killer on the loose. You need to stop him. So King Pasenadi put together an army, and a well-trained army. And this well-trained army went out to find Angulimala. And as this army found Angulimala and approached Angulimala, chop, chop, chop. Angulimala's like, sweet, now I got even more fingers. thanks for the fingers, King Pasenadi. And they're like, whoa, this guy's nothing to mess with. So King Pasenadi took time to train a large army. And as word got out that there's this serial killer on the loose, Ahimsaka, Angulimala's mom, got word of it. And Angulimala's mom was like, Ahimsaka hasn't come back from school, and maybe it's like a mother's intuition, or he was born under that criminal's moon. I really think that may be my son out there. Maybe I should go out there and stop him. And then also, not only Angulimala's mom, but the Buddha got word of this. And the Buddha's like, man, that poor guy, he must be suffering to create this big mess in his life. I need to go find this guy. And so what happened was, at a very prominent moment, there was this large military of King Pasenadi's army going after Angulimala. There's Angulimala's mom going after Angulimala, and the Buddha going after Angulimala. You ever have one of those nights, right? Like, oh man, your mom was after you, the military was after you, the Buddha was after you. What a wild night. So this is one of those nights for Angulimala. And so as all of these characters are approaching Angulimala, the first one he sees is his mom. And it's in a particular space that Angulimala finds himself in, that he has 999 fingers. So he just needs one more. And he sees his mom. Sorry, Mom, you're going to have to go. And so as he's approaching his mother, he sees one more person. And this person is a monk. A guy, bald head, robes, walking all slow. And he's like, sweet, now I don't have to kill my mom. I can kill this monk. And so as Angulimala starts going to this monk, he has no clue that this is the Buddha. And so since he's very fast, Angulimala starts running as fast as he can to the Buddha. But he can't catch him. For some reason, anytime that Angulimala is running, and the Buddha's just doing that like slow, like Thich Nhat Hanh style walk, some reason he can't catch him. And he's just yelling at him, stop, 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 monk, stop, monk. And the Buddha turns, looks Angulimala right in the eyes, and says, I have stopped, Angulimala. Now it's your time to stop. And Angulimala was confused. He's like, what are you talking about? Stop. You're walking all slow. I'm running all fast. Stopping. He says, yes, I've stopped harming living beings. This is your time to stop harming living beings. And he never had anybody really confront him like this, that strong compassion. And so they start talking to one another. Angulimala is interested in what the Buddha has to say. And the Buddha asks Angulimala, hey, you see that big tree over there? Can you rip off a limb off that big tree? And Angulimala is like, yes, I'm very strong. Rips off the limb off the tree and shows it to the Buddha, all proud. And the Buddha says, well, can you put that limb back on the tree? And Angulimala is like, no, I can't. I've destroyed it. I cannot put it back on. And he says, yeah, see, your powers are only good for destroying. And then they end up having this conversation where, that tough love. You ever have somebody tell you, stop? Like, you're making a mess out of your life. Stop. I've had wonderful people. Like sometimes we talk about kindness and niceness aren't the same thing. Sometimes the kindest thing you could say to somebody is like that sting. And I think that's kind of what the Buddha was doing right now with Angulimala, just telling him, stop. There's a way out. Quit this. You're making a mess out of your life. And Angulimala was able to listen to this strong, stern compassion that the Buddha was giving him. And then he decided he quit. He threw down his sword, threw down the shield, threw off the finger necklace, and took on the robes, shaved his head, became a Buddhist monk. And so when he went to go live with the monks. King Pasenadi still had no clue that Angulimala was not out in the forest anymore. So King Pasenadi went to the Buddha. And King Pasenadi had his big military, and he asked the Buddha for a blessing. And the Buddha acted kind of dumb. He was like, okay, well, what, you got a war going on with a neighboring village? Why do you need a blessing? And King Pasenadi says, oh, we're going after Angulimala. And the Buddha said, well, what if Angulimala became a monk and joined my Buddhist order? Would you, forgive him? And King Pasenadi's like, yeah, right. This guy is a terrible person. There's no way he can become a holy person. He's evil and all bad. There's no way he could ever meditate or anything like that. And the Buddha says, well, look over there. There's Angulimala. And Pasenadi was like caught off guard. Like, whoa, that guy that was out there killing people, he's over there trying to live the holy life right now. And King Pasenadi says, like, you did what we couldn't do with violence and swords. You did without violence and swords. You've tamed Angulimala. I think that's pretty amazing. Like there's so many rich wisdoms in here, but the idea that we can tame without violence, and of course out in the world, but inside of myself, that internal Angulimala, that internal serial killer in me that I try to banish, defeat, and hate out. Maybe I can tame this part of me that's just longing for an embrace and for love. And so I want to pause there. Angulimala becomes a monk, right? End of the story so far. To be continued. And so there's a lot of messages here to understand that, one, Angulimala was, longing for love, that early childhood development stuff that we spend so much time in therapy talking about, right? That this is something that really affected him. That love was so conditional, and he was so obedient. And he was just on this cycle of craving for acceptance, craving for love, craving for perfection, that he never understood that there was this underlying childhood wound of not feeling loved. And so when we have space to feel that, whatever's longing for love, whatever pains underneath our harmful behavior, we can set aside and put down our figurative swords and shields. And so in my own life, I want to pause here and tell you a little bit about how this shows up in my own life. There was a time, it was early 2000s, for those of you that were around in the early 2000s, I was playing in a band, and we were like an extremely good band. Like looking back now, it was like pretty amazing. We got scouted by 2 majors and all of this, but it didn't work out, probably for the better. But we were pretty eclectic. I was like really into like glam metal and like glam punk and stuff like that. Loved like Johnny Thunders and the New York Dolls and Poison, Motley Crue, all of that. And we were also like a goth vibe, so we're like into like the Misfits and stuff like that. But then it was also early 2000s, so everything was fucking emo. And our stage presence was amazing, but especially our look. Like I had big hair, big beautiful hair, deep conditioned it every day. We got the hair irons out and all of that, right? And I wore makeup, like full on makeup, and I had, what's that?
Picture didn't happen.
Oh, okay. I could send you some. I don't have my PowerPoint slides of the way I looked, but I'll definitely send you some. I looked great. I would like, I'll show all of you, right? And this is like wearing the tight, pants and stuff like that. This is at the time where people weren't wearing, skinny jeans. We call them today. Back then we called them stretch jeans, and you had to go to like the cool punk stores to get them, right? And so I looked great, and at this time it did give me a little bit of openness to explore my gender identity. And so while I was on stage dressing like this with makeup and all this, off stage I was still dressing like this and wearing a purse and wearing makeup and having my hair all nice in my day-to-day life. And at one particular evening, I was at my apartment and I went to go get cigarettes at a gas station right in front of my house. And so I had to walk down an alley, go to the gas station, and as I was walking into the gas station, there was 3 guys, and they called me a specific derogatory term. And I told them to fuck off. Just no big deal. I'm used to it, right? I come from Northwest Florida. It's the lower Alabama. It's a quite a shocking scene to see somebody that looked like me at the time in this place. So I was used to it. Yeah, fuck off. No big deal. Go inside to get cigarettes, and then I come out and I start walking down the alley to go back to my home. And these guys followed me, and they just jumped me and just beat the living shit out of me, like relentlessly. Just on top of me, overpowering me, nothing I could do. And, this still somewhat lives in me today, right? The physical stuff, like I had to go to the hospital that night, and the physical healed enough, right? But the emotional lingered on, the embarrassment, the taking of safety that I felt, it affected me. And so from then on, I armored up. I even started carrying like weapons with me because not that I was trying to be tough, I was just fucking terrified. And so when at a certain point in my life, I don't like violence, but my body had no choice. When anybody came to me that felt like they were challenging me, I would get them before they got me because my body was like, no way, And so on one particular night, I was at a show, and come from a small community, so we would have go to shows, and we all kind of knew each other. And there was this one guy there I didn't particularly like, but he was still in the scene. And he was in the military, and so he would come and go and leave on deployment. And one night, we're out watching a show, he's with the crew, and he calls my girlfriend at the time a bitch. And I was like, what, dude, what's up with that? I was like, watch your mouth. And he's like, man, I'm just joking. And then my hand went right to his throat, and I threw him down, and I overpowered him. I got on top of him. And just like those guys got on top of me, I was on top of him. And it's like this cycle of violence was going on and living right through me. And then the fight ended, threw some beer on him, I laughed it off, went on my way. And so as this guy was coming and going from deployment, I remember one day I was at work and somebody told me, and it still hits me today, that he was in Afghanistan and died, serving in the military, right? Yeah. And it just feels really real right now, this pain, this regret. Came time to stop. And so, this is one of many stories that led me to a place to stop. I don't want to be that person that's jumping on somebody just like somebody jumped on me. And so through my own path in this practice, I discovered compassion. I discovered compassion for that kid that just felt outcasted by the area I grew up in. I felt compassion for that embarrassment that I felt by being overpowered. I felt compassion for that fear. And the more and more I can feel compassion for that underlying woundedness, I'm not acting out in harmful behaviors, and I'm ending this cycle of suffering that I was previously perpetuating. And so, while this story of Angulimala is quite cartoonish, right? I bet it's really real in y'all's life too, huh? So I did want to pause there, but let's continue. Angulimala part 2. Let's move forward, see where this story goes, and let's see where our story goes, my story goes, your story goes. And so as Angulimala became a Buddhist monk, he went right from killing people to meditating. Wild, right? And so as he sat in meditation, he got images of people crying in terror, fearing for their lives, images of blood and guts and horror going on in his meditation. And he was like, no, that's too much. I can't do this. Meditation is supposed to be this blissful, peaceful experience, and there's nothing peaceful in my experience. And so he's out walking in meditation, and at the time, Even today, in the Theravada tradition, monks and nuns only eat what is freely given. And so Angulimala had to eat from the generosity of the townspeople, or else he couldn't eat. So, if you can imagine, Angulimala is out there in robes and a bowl and begging for food from the same people that he killed, their mothers, fathers, children. And so as he's begging for food, somebody's like, no, I'm not giving you food. You're not a holy person. You're a murderer. Get out of here, Angulimala. And he's not fed. So he sees another group of people. Oh no, you killed my grandmother. There's no way I'm going to feed you. And then he sees this family. Oh, this sweet family that's feeding all the monks and nuns. Maybe they'll give me food. And so he gets in line, and then they say, oh, that's the guy who killed Grandpa. Get him, right? And they jump on Angulimala. You're not a holy person. Start attacking him, trying to rip his robes off of him, throwing him in the mud. And he's like, oh, I'm defeated. I'm trying to better my life, and this is just so hard. I sit in meditation, it's awful. I go out into the town, they're not forgiving me. And so he goes to the Buddha, and he's just coming up like, this is not working. I can't do this. And the Buddha said, embrace it, Angulimala, embrace it. Embrace your karma, embrace the pain, embrace this. And Angulimala is like, what the hell? I'm trying to better my life. Nobody will give me a break. Not even the Buddha will give me a break. So he sits in meditation, and he's pissed. I don't know if you've ever sat in meditation pissed. I know I have, especially at my teachers. They'll tell me something. I'm like, oh, so I've been there, Angulimala. So he sits there mad at his teacher, at the Buddha, and he's sitting there. Embrace it. So he embraces his anger. Okay? He's like, that's something. That's something. And then as he sees the images of horror playing out, he embraces that too. It's like, oh yeah, embrace that karma, that mind I have to sit with. Okay, I embrace that. And then he embraced even further into his life about his classmates, trying to get rid of them, the rejection he felt there. Oh, he embraced that. Until he embraced it fully down to this kid, staying up all night, crying and worrying about a math test, crying and worrying where he's going to get love from, and just worried that his parents won't support him unconditionally. And what Angulimala did, he embraced that. Embraced that inner child that's just longing for love. And what happened was he developed a big-ass heart. When Angulimala was able to find compassion for the terror, compassion for the child within, he got really good at bearing witness to pain. You know, we say that no mud, no lotus, right? And Ajahn Brahm says the shit makes great fertilizer. And so, and Debbie says it too. And so we have, Angulimala had a lot of shit to be great fertilizer for this beautiful heart that could be so compassionate. And so Angulimala is out one day doing walking meditation, and he hears somebody crying out for help, help, help. And Angulimala runs. He's still very fast, so he runs to this person, and what he finds is a woman unable to give birth. Like she's having a tough birth out in the forest. And so Angulimala just jumps to her side and says, oh, can I help you? And she says, help me, help me. With resistance, because she's like, oh no, that's the serial killer. He's going to kill me. And he says, no, I won't kill you. I won't kill you. I'll find you help. And so he runs back to the Buddha very quickly. And he goes to the Buddha and says, there's this woman out there, and she's going to die, and her child's going to die. What can I do? And the Buddha said, okay, run back to her and hold her and give her this blessing. He says, say to her, sister, I have never deprived a living being of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. And so Angulimala is like, what? I've never deprived a living being of life. Remember, my name's Angulimala. Remember where I came from? And the Buddha's like, okay, you're right. So let's change this up a little bit. He said, say to her, sister, since I was born of this noble birth, I have never purposefully deprived living beings of life. By this truth, may you be well, and may your infant be well. And so this noble birth, right? That as we acknowledge rebirth in this tradition, and I'm not talking about a metaphysical rebirth. In every moment there is a rebirth. While we may have some karma from our past, we can have a rebirth in this moment in a new direction. And the new direction for him was compassion rather than murder. And so he runs up to this woman, and brings that sweet compassion in and says this to her, looks into her eyes, and it just calms her down, right? And just has that way of holding space for this woman who's so afraid she's going to die and so afraid that her child's going to die. And he has space for her and helps her, and the child lives and she lives. And so this woman is very quick to tell everybody in the town. I said, Angulimala? They're like, yeah, fuck that guy. And then she's like, no, he performs miracles now. He performed a miracle and saved me and my child. And so now the townspeople are like, oh, Angulimala is a saint. And even to this day, especially in regions like Sri Lanka, people pray, so-called pray or chant, the sister, since I have not deprived a living being of a birth since that. This is the chant that they give for people who are pregnant. And so if you go on YouTube and you look up Angulimala chant, you get this chant that's it's nothing about murder, right? It's all about pregnancy and birth and all of that. So I think that's quite beautiful that people are praying to a serial killer in Sri Lanka, probably right now. And so, there's a lot of messages in this, and some of which are cartoonish, right? That to expect it, everybody forgive and forget. I don't know about that, but it's a fun story. But one of which I want to highlight before we move into a discussion is forgiveness. And while forgiveness can be a confusing term, I find myself reserving myself talking about forgiveness because it's a quite complex issue, because it can be used in harmful ways. And so in this Buddhist path, I think we can understand that everything has a cause. And when we understand that, especially around self-forgiveness, that I've had to do plenty of self-forgiveness, when I have an understanding that hurt people, that saying, that I was reactive to my hurt, reactive to my pain. And if I hold space for my pain, I will be less reactive. And so while I can honor this pain and have an understanding, I can have a noble rebirth. And I've had many noble rebirths in my life into a new life. And just understanding that I was doing the best I could at the time with the resources I had. Everybody's doing the best they can, and we can do better. So it's acceptance and hope. And so there's a few different cliches and sayings around forgiveness that we say here, that forgiveness is abandoning all hope for a better past. So that's that part of acceptance. What happened, definitely. Take accountability, honor that, know that. And you can let somebody into your heart without letting them into your home. That forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be best friends again. Boundaries are awesome, and actually boundaries have helped me forgive people. Because what forgiveness is abandoning the resentment. That resentment's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? That we're just poisoning ourselves with resentment. And sometimes it's easier to not resent people when you have a distance from them. And so forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean all is forgotten. Forgiveness is about setting aside the resentments and understanding, having wisdom of forgiveness, that when that person hurt me, they were in a great deal of pain and confusion. That all harm in this world comes from pain and confusion. Even the longing, right? Angulimala's story, he was longing for more, and that created harm because he had this pain in his life of longing for love. So I did want to tease that out a little bit about some of my thoughts on this story. So I want to open it up to y'all. And I would love to hear, that, yes, this is almost like fairy tale stuff, because over time, I'm sure when this happened, it was like, much different story. And I know I'm taking a lot of folklore of this story, but what do you hear in this story? And where do you hear this in your own life? And putting this into practice. And what part of you longs for compassion? What part of you needs forgiveness? Or what part of you needs to forgive? And so I want to open it.
What's up, y'all? Reverend Mikey Noechel here from Wild Heart Meditation Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks for checking us out. Do me a favor, please like and subscribe. And if you feel moved to leave a donation, you can do so at wildheartmeditationcenter.org or the Venmo link in the description. Peace and love.